good. Let me just share my screen quickly.
I'm going live on YouTube and we are live.
Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our June meetup. And like I was just talking with the guys now, we are planning actually to go back to our regular meetup starting next month. And we are planning hopefully to host our first physical meetup after the lockdown at the AWS office in near Mid Valley. So hopefully we can meet as we have a lot of new people joining us. So my name is Mohanraj. I'm a solutions architect and lead technical trainer for AirAsia. And I have as well Kaushik with me here, where we do organize all these meetups every month. And we have Salam as well and Gohar. They are not here with us, but they do help us as well at organizing all of these events. And as you know, from the last meetup, we are trying to do something new, and we start with something called blockchain series. And Harith was with us in the first episode, if we can call it that, where he gave us an overview about that. And today he will go deep dive into Etherscan, and this is your chance to ask him as much as you want about this topic. And we have as well Kaushik, where later after Harith finished from his talk, they will just chat about what Etherscan, blockchain, whatever question you guys as well, you can jump in the conversation. Before we get started as well and pass it to Harith, I just want to share with you guys, sorry, it's supposed to be in the page. I just want to share with you the link that Kaushik just shared yesterday about the certifications. So if you are planning to do any certification in the next 90 days, AWS will support you and we will pass you a voucher for your exam. So what you can do if you want this form, I'm going to pass it now on the chat. But if you are not yet joined our Facebook group, you can just join us and check all our interesting conversation happening there. And you can get all the latest news as well related to our user group. So I'm going to paste this one in the chat for people who's following with us. If not, you can just, if you are seeing this video on YouTube live stream, you can just go to our AWS User Group Malaysia, and we'll happy to have you there. Okay, so I will pass it to you, Harith, from here. Please take over. I will stop now my screen.
All right. Thanks for the introduction. Let me share my screen quick. Oops, wrong button. Let me see. Can you see my... Hold on, I think we had this issue last time. I'm gonna just simply share my entire screen.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you see like the full presentation?
Yeah, I can see it very clear.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so again, thanks for the introduction. I'm Harith. I am managing product and community at Etherscan. So in the previous session we had, I gave like an introduction to blockchain. So if you want later, you can check that part. Here we'll be diving deep into Etherscan and why it matters to you and me and to the blockchain space as a whole. So the quick introduction is that we are a block explorer for Ethereum. A longer introduction is that a block explorer is kind of like a search engine, and it provides lots and lots of data. And we also do it not just for Ethereum, but also for some of the other leading blockchains as well. And to explain what I mean by search engine, if you think about Web 1, like maybe in the 90s, this is the kind of search engine that you'd see. It's a bit clunky, messy, but you can search for a lot of things on the internet. And then Web 2 came around, the internet that we're used to now. The search engine is much better, much more contextual, and you can search for a lot of other things that you weren't able before. Then if you've heard of this term called Web3, Etherscan is like a search engine for Web3. And what that means is that not only can you search for any information out there using search engines like Google, but you can search for any transactions or any accounts on the blockchain using Etherscan. So for example, I'm showing here, this is a token page. I am tracking a particular crypto token, and I can see who's been transferring it, who are the holders, and lots of information like that. And it's done in real time. Other than it just being a search engine, another way I like to describe it as is it's like a read-only bank account. So if you remember from the previous blockchain talk, when it comes to the blockchain, anyone can see any data out there as long as they know the address hash. They can enter that and they can see anything in that address. No one can stop them from doing that. And if you were a programmer and you were running your own node, then you can use your own node. But for the vast majority of people, they want a quick and easy way to see this information. So Etherscan is the way for them to do it. You can enter information such as a transaction or address hash, and you'll be able to see a lot of information there. I'll explain a little bit more in depth later. And so why Etherscan matters, especially if you're Malaysian listening in, we are a Malaysian company, but we are the leading block explorer. So the leading search engine, if you can imagine something like Google, for some of the biggest smart contract enabled blockchains in the entire world. So just looking at some metrics from earlier this year, we are consistently in the top 1,000 websites, and that's not just for Etherscan, but also for another explorer that we run called BSCscan. And both websites also had more than 100 million users in the year of 2021. So combined, it's 200 million. That's like 7 times the population of Malaysia. So just to give a sense of scale of the amount of usage of Etherscan and the sister websites. And most of these users are not from Malaysia, maybe like less than 1% or 0.1% are actually from Malaysia, and everyone else is from all over the world. I mentioned just now that we run a block explorer not just for Ethereum, but for a bunch of the different top blockchains. So this is a website that tracks the largest smart contract enabled blockchains. And you can see here from the top 10, we actually have a block explorer for 6 of the leading ones. And if anyone here follows the crypto space, there are a bunch of people who are very well respected in the space. And it's kind of cool just as a Malaysian to see that these people kind of appreciate a company that was created out of Malaysia. So the team is led by Matthew Tan. He's our CEO and founder. Even before he started Etherscan, he had more than 15 years of experience in the local tech scene. He was a CTO for a local software dev house. A bunch of really smart people. Kairul, who's the head of engineering, Hanshi, who leads up our infrastructure. And we do a lot of it bare metal. So there's a lot of expertise that needs to be there as well. And so okay, the next part, I think I'm just gonna run through some key features. I have some slides here, but I think it's probably better if I show you guys this on my browser, assuming my Wi-Fi doesn't break. Yeah, okay, so this is the Etherscan homepage. So when you go here, you'll see a bunch of different information about the underlying Ethereum blockchain. So I guess important to a lot of people is to know what the current price of Ether is. There's a bunch of stuff like gas price, number of transactions. We can see here latest updated data of latest blocks in the blockchain and latest transactions that were made, and some other information here. And the first key feature, forgot to turn off dark mode before I changed. I'll just refresh each time. So I mentioned earlier that people use Etherscan to look at their transactions. So imagine if you were to make a transaction using your bank account and you want to send some money to someone somewhere around the world. You want to be able to give them a receipt to show that, okay, this transaction was actually done. When it comes to the blockchain, there's no such thing as a middleman bank account. So you can actually just look at the blockchain and show data from there. But as I mentioned, if you don't run your own node and you want to handle the command line stuff, then you want to be able to use a nice UI such as Etherscan. So Etherscan actually is used by a lot of people to show as a receipt when they've made a transaction. So for example, if I sent you some money, what I would do is I would take this URL and send it over to you via WhatsApp or Telegram so that you can see that the transaction was done. So just a very quick run through of the transaction page. You'll see the transaction hash, which is the identifier of the transaction, the status. Something that we've added for certain types of transactions is this kind of highlight section, just to describe in more layman-friendly words what's happening. So in this case, it's a sale of one NFT on OpenSea, which is an NFT marketplace. And this is the unique token ID of the NFT and a bunch of other details related to the transaction. It's probably going to be like a whole workshop's worth of things just to run through. But so there's a lot of details here. As a developer, you can also decode this data to find out in more detail, especially if you want to replicate this kind of transaction or copy this kind of contract. And there's also like even more advanced stuff here that just displays what exactly is happening under the hood. And there's also a couple more advanced features here, which I will run into right now, but happy to share later on if anyone wants to go deeper. So the first part was a transaction receipt. The second part that a lot of people use Etherscan for is to look at an account balance. So as I said earlier, it's like a read-only bank account. So you can actually see the details of an account. And the cool/scary thing about blockchain is that you can see the details of any account out there. So in this case, I'm looking at Vitalik.eth. So this is the account owned by Vitalik, who is the founder of Ethereum. In this case, he tied his address to what's called an ENS name, or basically a name domain. So he is kind of publicly showing his address. So we're not necessarily doxing him in this particular case, but some people might not want to, so they might not share this ENS name. So that's the first thing to mention. So Etherscan, we support this ENS name. So if you've created this ENS name, that you've bought the domain name and you've tied it to your address, then we will actually show it all over the website. So on this address page, you can see a bunch of things. So you can see the total balance that Vitalik has in Ether, which is the native currency of Ethereum, and the total value of tokens that he has, which can be any number of different tokens that are out there. And then, as with any bank account, you can look at the transaction history of whether him sending transactions out or people sending transactions in. This is a kind of a simple overview of what has been happening. A cool column here is what's called a method column. So you can have an idea of what that transaction is doing. Because Ethereum is a smart contract enabled blockchain, it can do a bunch of things. Whereas Bitcoin, you can pretty much only transfer, like send and receive BTC, which is the coin on Bitcoin. On Ethereum, you can do a lot of programmatic things. You can either do a simple transfer, or you can interact with a smart contract to do any number of millions of things that anyone can imagine or anyone can code for a program to be able to do. Yeah, so we also have a CSV export. A lot of people like to use this, especially when they want to account for tax season. And you can also look at the total transactions instead of the latest 25 if you click on this button. For those who are familiar with the different types of tokens on Ethereum and many other blockchains, there are the ERC20, which is the fungible tokens. And then there are the 721 tokens, which are what people call NFTs or non-fungible tokens. And 1155, which is also a kind of non-fungible token, or what's called a semi-fungible token. And there's like an analytics tab where you can see a bunch of high-level data about your or anyone's address. This is a cool recent thing that we added based on GitHub, just to see how active a wallet is. And you can even leave a comment using discuss on any address out there. So a similar page to address, if I went to click this button on the address page just now, this one gives a bit more in-depth detail about the address. So it will show the different assets that's in the wallet, and liquidity pools are a bit more decentralized finance. I'm not going to go too much into detail there, but these are some of the things that people can do on Ethereum, and we actually show that on Etherscan. And we also show NFTs that are in a particular wallet. And I'll explain a bit more on that later as well. So there's transactions, addresses, and the third kind, which I mentioned briefly earlier, is this token page. So there are many different crypto tokens out there. Ethereum hosts a bunch of them, some of the biggest ones. And here you can see details related to a particular token. So in this case, it's a USD coin, which is what's called a stable coin that a lot of people use. Basically, it's pegged to $1 US, and so it's much more stable than coins such as Bitcoin or Ether. And here you can see a bunch of data that is on the blockchain. So for example, I can see the total supply of USDC that's on the chain, the total number of holders and how it's changed over the last 1 week, number of transfers, a bunch of social media information related to the project. Similar to address page, I can see a bunch of transactions. A really cool thing is I can see the top holders of the token and how much percentage they own of a supply. So if there's any kind of cryptocurrency that your friend is telling you to buy, one quick thing you can check is if like one address owns like more than half of the total supply. That can be a kind of a red flag, just because it's not very decentralized, the ownership. So they can, manipulate the market for that token if they wanted to. And yeah, so we show all this, and we also have CSV exports as well for this and many other pages. We even show trades of this token on decentralized exchanges, which I'll cover in a couple tabs. But here you can see like as recent as basically real time, when a transaction was made, we'll show the actual details of the transaction with more information if you click on this icon. For anyone who's familiar with how cryptocurrency transactions are made, there's always this market price that's dynamic. And here we have a very popular page that people like to use, what's called the Etherscan gas tracker. So we track the current market price of making a transaction. So gas, you can think of it as like the fuel for your car, and how maybe not in Malaysia, but in some other countries, the fuel prices will always fluctuate. So you can see here the number changed earlier. We update every 10 seconds. So now if you want to make a transaction on Ethereum, you have a sense of how much you need to pay so that your transaction can be processed as soon as possible. There's a couple nifty stuff here. So for example, an estimated cost of certain popular types of transactions, such as buying an NFT on OpenSea or swapping tokens on Uniswap, a bunch of other popular tools as well. And I think you can, the very end here, you can even set your own, for advanced users, the gas limit that you wanna pay. We also show the top gas guzzlers, so the contracts that are using up gas the most, and people actually use this to find out like what's happening on the blockchain, what are people like FOMOing into, or like rushing into because they see other people doing it. So this is a good place to see that kind of information. Next is, so I mentioned earlier the DEX page. So this is the page in full, not just showing one particular token, but showing all tokens that are out there. And again, this one also does it in pretty much real time, although you have to refresh instead of it updating by itself. And if I click into a particular DEX or decentralized exchange icon here, then I can actually see the chart for that particular exchange and the particular trading pair. So I can see here, this is the current price, this is the liquidity of that trading pair, some overall information, the kind of latest price movements, and the latest transactions that are in that trading pair. So this is very useful for any traders, not necessarily developers, but people who want to make trades on-chain. They can use this page to have an idea of what the price that they want to set is. Then for the NFT kind of loving people, we have an NFT tracker where we show the latest mints or trades of NFTs on multiple different marketplaces with like details such as the price of that transaction. And if you click inside any of these, then you'll see a bunch of detailed information about any particular NFT. So the image, some overall information, some pricing information, even like the sort of unique properties of that particular NFT and how rare that property is, and any kind of transactions that were made involving that NFT before. Now for a bit more, I think, developer-focused stuff. So the blockchain is public, permissionless, and it's open source. So one of the cool things that Etherscan provides is that you can verify a contract where if you deploy a contract by itself, then even though it's on the blockchain, if people don't know what it does or how to read it or interact with it, then it's not really permissionless or decentralized. But if you can verify the contract, so basically what you do is you upload the details of the smart contract, the code, and Etherscan will match that against what's deployed on the blockchain. And if it matches one-to-one, then we know that it's correct, and then we can display a lot of data related to this particular contract. So I actually forgot to open this one, so I'm just gonna try and open one. Hopefully it's a good contract. But yeah, so for
quick one here, Harith.
Sorry?
So a quick one. So in this, who's the one who authorizes the contract?
When it comes to the blockchain, there's no central authority that authorizes anything. Anyone can create a smart contract if they want to. You just have to pay the gas price, the transaction price to deploy the contract. And yeah, so even if Etherscan doesn't like your contract for whatever reason, it will always be here on the blockchain, and it will always be shown on Etherscan. But what it would look like by default is that it wouldn't have this check mark, and we won't be able to say that the contract source code is verified. So we won't be able to show all this detail of the code. It will be a bunch of kind of nonsensical kind of hashes. But if the deployer of this contract or anyone who knows how the contract works can verify the contract code, then it's done automatically by Etherscan. As long as the code matches, we will then display all this information, which makes it very useful for anyone, whether user or developer, to look into the contract. So like I can read the contract code and I can figure out what it's doing, whether it's doing what the project team says that it intends to do. Like the code is all there. It's in a publicly available language that anyone can learn. So we can see what this contract does. So if you can imagine like a smart contract that holds like $10 billion, you would want to know whether the contract code is doing what it says it's doing, right? Otherwise, whoever created this code could create some sort of function to let them run away with that money. But if it's all there and it's been audited and anyone who knows how to read the contract can read the contract, then you can check that it's doing what it's supposed to do. And unfortunately, but in reality, a lot of even not good people, a lot of like hackers have gone through codes and they found vulnerabilities and they've done hacking on that contract to essentially steal or exploit the funds that are inside and take it for themselves. So if you hear about all these DeFi hacks that are happening worth like millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, in many cases, not necessarily all, but in many cases it's because there was some bug in the code that some hacker managed to figure out and exploit because it's open source and decentralized. So that's a kind of a cool / scary thing with blockchains. So in this case, we'll show the contract code. If there was any audit that was done, we also show the audit and done by which auditor, so people can even read the audit themselves to learn more. And a bunch of other details as well here. And a really, really cool thing, especially if you're not a developer, by verifying a contract, you allow the user to read the contract. So for example, when we say read, we want to like just not make any execution related to the code, but we just want to like know what the smart contract, what it has, or what functions we can read without executing. So for example, like I can see here the owner of this address, and if I enter like some details, I can actually see, I hope this works. Sorry guys, I'm just doing this live. So I can actually see a bunch of details. This is something that NFTs usually do. I'm not going to display that here, but yeah, so you can read the contract. And a super cool thing is that you can actually also write to a contract. So if I connect my Web3 wallet using this button, I can interact with this smart contract directly from Etherscan. And that's a very cool thing if you can think about it. So like if you compare that to Web2, where anything that you want to do, let's say you want to write a post on Facebook, or you want to sell an item on Lazada, like you'd have to go through the official UI of that particular company. But when it comes to the blockchain, even if that, let's say Lazada's UI is down, for whatever reason, maybe they didn't pay their AWS bills, so their server's not up, but anyone can create their own user interface and point that user interface to a smart contract. So let's say in this case, it's this contract. Then I can do transactions directly using that smart contract without using Lazada's UI. I can use, let's say, Etherscan as an alternative UI to be able to execute transactions. So that's something that is super powerful about blockchain. And even today, where blockchain is still relatively early in its days, you can use Etherscan to interact if an official website is down. So a lot of NFT people have used Etherscan essentially to mint NFTs when it first gets deployed, because sometimes the traffic gets so huge on their own website that it crashes. And then people would come to Etherscan to be able to do that minting. You can also search for a bunch of things on Etherscan. So we have a smart contract search tool. So basically, I can search for any like keywords related to a smart contract that I might remember, let's say in their contract code, and I can enter a bunch of filters, and then we'll show you, the user, a contract that matches your keyword search. This is also another cool thing, maybe not so much for developers, but you can actually sign a message using your wallet. So I can actually like declare that this address belongs to me by signing a message. So this involves some hashing. Basically, I use my my private key to sign a message using my wallet, and then Etherscan verifies that the corresponding hash that was created matches the input plus the key of the signer. So this is still super early, but you can imagine in a couple years, once this gets more mature, you can potentially like sign a message using Etherscan, and at the same time sign a post on, let's say, Twitter, and when both sides are have confirmed, then you can show that you actually own a particular Twitter account and it's tied to a wallet address. There's many kind of potential use cases here. One current one that actually people would have told me they want to use is if they are looking to apply for a job in the crypto space, and they have a resume and they want to show on top of the resume that they know how to use the blockchain. They're not just like LARPing, they're not just like talking about how much they know about blockchain, but they can actually show an address that they own and they've done all kinds of transactions. But if you can't prove that you own the address, then I still need to trust you when you tell me that this address belongs to you. But if you can sign a message and it gets shown on Etherscan, then I can know that this wallet does belong to you, or at least that you own the private keys to that wallet. Another popular feature is like a token approval. So it's a little bit more advanced, but like you can see what contracts out there that you have allowed to spend your tokens. Yeah, so it's pretty common thing. You can allow a particular smart contract to spend, let's say, up to $1,000 that's in your wallet, and then it does things automatically. But sometimes you might want to revoke the approval if, let's say, that contract becomes compromised. So you can check that and do that here. And a very important thing for developers in this space is that they use Etherscan API to be able to do, well, all kinds of things out there. So this is like just the documentation page. You can see a bunch of different things that you can get from Etherscan. So for example, here, if I wanted to see the list of token transfers that were made by an address, I can just check how to do it here. And like this is an example. Obviously, you guys have way better ways to display JSON. But so you can create all kinds of applications or products out there and be able to simply use Etherscan API to surface data that's from the blockchain. So whether it's the amount of balance the address has, or transactions that it's made, or all kinds of other data out there, developers can use Etherscan's API for most people essentially for free, because we provide a free tier, and only for the users who want to have higher call limits or specific endpoints that are heavier, then they can apply for an Etherscan API Pro account, where there is a monthly subscription that they have to pay. And lastly, but certainly not least, this is something that's very far from the Block Explorer itself. It's almost a product that is separate. So the team behind Etherscan has also created blockscan chat, where it's a way for you to message anyone in the world, even if you don't know their phone number or their email address. So if you know nothing about them, you don't even know who they are, but you know what their address is, you can actually message them using blockscan chat. So yeah, I'll just show you my page. I don't think there's anything super secret. Yeah, so I can actually send a message to someone, even if I don't know who they are. And you can imagine, let's say in 5 years or 10 years time, once the technology has evolved and grown and the adoption of the technology has also evolved, you can have an option to send a message that is not using, let's say, WhatsApp or Telegram. And you can send it to anyone across the world that you might not know in real life, but through some metaverse game or like an online multiplayer game where you don't know any details and you might not want to share any details other than a wallet address. Some current uses that people actually use it for is to like warn a particular address if they have been compromised in some way, or if you want to negotiate a purchase of an NFT and you don't know who the owner is, you can actually reach out to the owner. And yeah, a bunch of other use cases as well. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it on the Etherscan introduction. Oh, before my HR person reminds me, I should at least spend a couple seconds just to say that we're hiring. So any developers, if you are doing .NET, then that's especially who we're looking to hire. And if there are any DevOps people, that's also something that we really want to look for. So Etherscan's a Malaysian team. Vast majority of the team is Malaysian. It's registered in Malaysia. We think that if we were to ever raise funds, then we would be considered a unicorn. But right now, the company is profitable, so there's no reason to raise funds. And we actually contribute quite a bit of tax revenue to the country. So yeah, if anyone wants to join our team, please feel free to reach out. You can go to the link that I'm sharing here, or you can reach out to me. I'm on Twitter, on Telegram, on a lot of different places. Yeah, so thanks everyone, and back to you.
I think that was the most convincing and patriotic pitch ever to get people to get hired. Love that.
Thanks.
Mo, you there? He had to drop off for a call, but I'm just checking in. All right.
In the meantime, maybe I can answer Farhan's question.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So Etherscan, we have, as you can imagine, we have limited resources. The team isn't that big. We have maybe 30 plus people, and we're powering like maybe like 20 different block explorer websites that the whole world uses. So we don't really have that much time to do workshops and stuff. But a bunch of us are actually members of a local Ethereum Malaysia community. So there's a meetup group there, and we've done a bunch of workshops. It's also recorded on YouTube, so you can find some useful stuff there. And you can also join the local community and just ask questions there, or suggest like workshops that might be useful, and we can always arrange for that to be done.
Great, thanks for that, Harith. Any more questions from the team, the audience? If not, and anyone who's seeing live on YouTube as well, please drop it in the comments and we'll take that up. Right. Perfect. So Harith, moving forward, what we want to do is take your knowledge and dig deep into the concept of blockchain itself, beyond and use your knowledge to ensure and gain more inputs here and learn on that. So if I can start, we'll actually start the fireside chat we would like to call it. A few questions for you to start off with. A couple of times you did mention, this is something which is really cool, but at the same time, which is scary because it is, visible to everyone, open to everyone who is on the chain and who can try and make their way through it, right? And if they're able to read through it, and you specified one point where the code is exploitable, you can get hacked. So what is a sure shot way, even when we are on a blockchain where we say it is all controlled, decentralized, but at the same time, what are the key things someone who's starting their point of career or just starting off with blockchain that you need to take care of? What would be your recommendation for them?
Yeah, so my advice may not be the popular advice, especially for people who want to make money. So what I always tell people is that you need to make sure you understand how it works. A lot of people, they sometimes they trade on an exchange in the first place, which is not even on the blockchain. All these cryptocurrencies, and first of all, in many of those cases, they don't know what they're trading. So when you do that, then that's no different than gambling. And then some people actually go and do things on chain, which is, I think, really cool because you're not just using some exchange, you're actually using the blockchain itself. But when they do that, let's say when they kind of create art and then sell it as an NFT, there are many cases where they don't first understand what a wallet actually is and what are the important security things to take note of. Like there have been a case like by a local NFT artist who managed to sell like their art for like tens of thousands of ringgit, and which is a really cool thing that would be very difficult for them to do in their normal kind of art selling in the real world. But they didn't bother to like properly understand security and how to manage their wallet. So they ended up having their wallet hacked and had all that money lost. So yeah, so the most important thing is to understand blockchain itself. So if you watch the previous session, then hopefully that helps at least to give a broad idea of what it is, and then to really understand what a wallet is, and how to secure it and how to make sure it doesn't be vulnerable to it's not vulnerable to attacks. Yeah, so if you do that, then you should be a lot safer. I can never say it's 100% safe, but maybe like 99% safe if you know what you're doing. And yeah, so just make sure you understand what it is and how to use it before you go all degen on the blockchain.
Right. And I think we need a complete session to understand where we can start and where we can start to understand blockchain, right? So the basics. I think we can have a completely different session to go through that, where and do the basics and understand what those are. But taking a cue from your point that you mentioned regarding NFT and how it gives a platform for artists, right? We all now, when we think about NFT, we think about artists and selling it. But during your session, you did mention about how non-fungible funds can be used otherwise as well, right? So what are the other avenues that NFT has and how people can look at it, apart from this popular way of selling art?
Yeah, so a really kind of important point to take note about NFTs is like, as its name says, it's a non-fungible token. And non-fungible just means that, if you look at the real world, let's say your ringgit, 1 ringgit is fungible, right? Because that same blue piece of paper, you can change it with any other blue piece of paper and the value is the same. But if you try to do that with your girlfriend's cat or your own car and trade it with another cat or car, then most likely you get into trouble because these things are not like for like, right? You can't exchange one car for another at exactly the same value. So these are non-fungible. So in the real world, most things are non-fungible. If you think about it, like things like cash are non-fungible, but almost everything else things like cash are fungible, but almost everything else is non-fungible or are unique with each item, right? But if you think about the digital world, let's say you have your like online movie or online game, like it's very difficult to make something unique or non-fungible, because anything that exists in a digital format, you can just right click, copy, paste, and then now you have two versions of the same item. So when it comes to the digital space, when it comes to ownership, it's been practically impossible to show the uniqueness of an item, whether it's in a game or in any kind of other environment. The way that people have been able to do it is that they trust a specific company, right? So let's say if anyone here ever played Second Life, if you own a house, a property in that virtual world, that property is actually just an entry in the Second Life company's database. Like there's no actual uniqueness there. If that company later decided to change it up, or if they shut down, then that entire asset that you own in that virtual land has disappeared. Like you don't own it anymore. But what NFTs do is that they enshrine as an ownership to a specific unique token on the blockchain. So even if let's say Second Life says that they shut down, but if in their virtual world the assets that exist there are tied to a blockchain, let's say on Ethereum, then even if Second Life shuts down, that asset still exists. And a very cool thing also with games is that if you use an asset that's on a blockchain, right, that's not owned by any specific company, and a game uses that in their game, you can imagine that same asset is used in many different games out there. So like you have the same asset, but you can use it in many different games. Maybe for the non-gamers here, that doesn't sound very interesting, but if you think about a similar use case, so what if you use your like NFT as a proof of identity? So you can, let's say, sign in using your wallet address that owns a particular NFT, and you can sign in to Twitter, to Facebook, to Instagram, all these different sites. And all they care about when to find out who you are in their network is to check this NFT that you own. So like you could sign into Twitter, and instead of having to give up your name and email address and other personal data to Twitter, you can just use your NFT. So without you even registering your details on Twitter, Twitter just needs to check the NFT on the blockchain, where that NFT shows like your name and other important information. So that identity you can carry with you to other social media as well. Like it's identity that you own, and it's not owned by the specific social network. So that's something that is, at least in my opinion, is something that is extremely powerful and gives the user power over their data, over the sort of the company that is hosting the network. And in this case, it's actually not very far off. I mentioned ENS earlier, that the one that where I showed Vitalik.eth. So ENS actually has this essentially this capability. You can tie an avatar image. You can tie your different like profiles on different social media or different websites. You can tie it to addresses on different blockchains that you own, and this essentially identity information you can carry with you wherever you go on any website on the internet, and it's just a matter of different companies adopting this use case before other people will feel pressured to do that, because otherwise their competitors will do it before them. I think this is happening already. Discord, actually, if you're familiar with the Discord messaging app, actually had plans to do this already or something similar, but they pushed it back. But eventually it will happen. And yeah, so that's a very strong use case where you can use an NFT as a form of identity instead of giving up your personal data to a company.
Interesting. And to that point, in NFT, I also had a related question where you mentioned about rarity during your presentation. In an NFT and a non-fungible token, there was a percentage related to rarity, right? This is 6% rarity or something of that sort. So my understanding when I talk about any NFT, that is unique, right? So that thing is unique and rarity should be 100%. No one else should be able to own it or have access to it. So from a rarity standpoint, how do you put that together just to help the team and the audience here?
Yeah, so rarity is more of a something that the current market looks for when it comes to art and stuff like that. It's a little bit not super relevant to blockchains, but like when people buy NFT art, they like to buy ones where there is a certain rare feature. So for example, if the NFT art is a bunch of faces and then there's a specific type of eye, or it wears a specific kind of clothes, and those pair of clothes are rare compared to like the other NFTs within that collection. So maybe like there's 1,000 NFTs in a single collection and only like 10 has a particular feature, then it's rare compared to that 1,000. So people would bid higher for it. Yeah, it's kind of, it's more of a like a art collector kind of data. But we show it because a lot of people like to see
those who used to collect Pokemon cards or Beyblades.
Yeah.
Having the rarity with a dual shade, I think that's about it then.
Yeah. And you can brag to people, you own that one Pokemon out of the 10,000 that exists that has this specific feature. I do want to mention quickly that, so when we say NFTs are unique, there is an assumption there. Like the token itself is unique, but if someone were to create a piece of art, and tie it to a particular token, that same person could also just create another token and tie the same piece of art to that other token. So it's up to the creator themselves actually to do things correctly. There is an element of trust that you need to have on the NFT creator that they will like respect the uniqueness that they themselves would have mentioned earlier. But one difference here with like other art out there is that all this data is on chain. So if they were to like betray the trust of their art buyers, then people can see that on chain. But this is a little bit more in depth. There's a lot of things to discuss, both good and bad. But I just want to point it out, just as an FYI, so you're not caught by surprise later.
Right, great. Thanks for that, Harith. Now more related. I think we'll take another 10-15 minutes of your time, and also for our audience to understand from Etherscan and overall the blockchain itself, right? What kind of customers are you looking at who are using this? What domains are they from? From a use case standpoint, this is for the team to have a visibility on it.
Yeah, so when it comes to Etherscan, because as you can see, we have a bunch of different products out there, or different features out there. So we appeal to different types of users or customers. So I would describe us as having like broadly 4 or 5 different types of users. So The first one would be the people who are, I would describe as crypto natives. So these are people who are already very familiar with how blockchain works. They can go as deep into the rabbit hole as anyone. They can use the right contract feature on Etherscan. And so for them, Etherscan is like the kind of their bank account. They can see their balance, they can see their history, and they can actually even make transactions if they were to use the right contract. So this is one type of user. In this case, they're not a customer necessarily because they don't need to pay to use Etherscan. And a similar related type of user is those who are also using Etherscan for free, but they are more what I would describe as retail. So they might not be very familiar with blockchains. So if anyone here essentially listened to my talk last time and haven't really done much, but you've explored Etherscan, then you probably fall into this group. So you're not as advanced as the others, and you probably want to look for different things. So like products like the blockscan chat maybe is something that you find easier to use, or the NFT pages because there are less kind of technical data there. And again, this user doesn't pay Etherscan to be able to use the product. And then obviously as a search engine, even how Google does things is that for the users, they don't have to pay, but then there will be advertisers who want to advertise their product. So Etherscan has advertising, and these clients pay us to be able to advertise their products. So that's a third kind. A fourth kind is, as I mentioned earlier, the API. So there are developers who want to create their own projects, whether as a hobby or even as a full-fledged business, and they would use Etherscan API. So if they use a free tier, then they don't have to pay. But if they want the higher rate limits or the more heavy endpoints, then they would subscribe to our API Pro. And the last one, the fifth one is, so as I mentioned, we run a bunch of block explorers for a bunch of the different blockchains out there. And for many of them, this is actually a commercial product that we do. So we call it Explorer as a Service, or EAAS. And so these blockchain projects would negotiate a deal with the Etherscan team for us to build a block explorer for their blockchain. And this is like an annual subscription.
Great. Thanks for that insight, Harith. I think as a closing question to you from my end, if unless the audience have any question for you, is how do you see blockchain being used and the use cases of using it on cloud? Public clouds. For someone like me and other teams and yourself, if I have to go and use this on AWS, what kind of use cases are you seeing that people are using it, and what is the future on that?
Yeah, so I think the most obvious one is, and I think AWS has this service as well, is that if you are a developer and you want to create a blockchain project, you can use AWS's kind of node service, so that instead of having to run your own node, you can kind of make API calls to AWS and get data that is from the blockchain. So this is a bit different than Etherscan. Like Etherscan, we don't provide the underlying node calls, or at least I don't think we provide all of them. But if you want the direct data from the node itself, then I think that's something that AWS provides. So an obvious first thing is for developers to be able to call this data from the blockchain node using a cloud service. Secondly, if you want to run your own, let's say, a validator. So maybe I don't want to go too much detail, but like for certain kinds of blockchains that uses proof of stake consensus mechanism, you can stake a certain amount of your crypto and then run a node that validates transactions and proposes new transactions. So you are the equivalent of a miner when it comes to Bitcoin. So in some cases, some people might kind of criticize this approach, but you can run your own node at home, or you can just use a cloud service to kind of run this node for you on their cloud. And in that case, then you can essentially make money from securing the blockchain, from validating the transactions and proposing new transactions. Yeah, so those would be like the two main use cases for cloud services.
Sorry, I think I was on mute. Right. So great. I think that gives us a good segue to say thank you, Harith. This hopefully this was helpful for everyone. I enjoyed the session, and with that note, actually, we would also like to announce that this month, by end of this month, we would like to conduct the last part of this series, which of the blockchain series, which would be blockchain on cloud, or blockchain on AWS. That's the next one that we would like to have, and have more inputs from Harith and Fabian and other speakers who specialize on blockchain and can provide details on this. Right. So that's input. With this, we would like to conclude, and also to call out that we will be having we already have open forum for you to come and get your free vouchers if you intend and plan to give your exam, as Mo had mentioned. Sharing the link here for everyone to go through, take your free practice exams that are available on Skill Builder, and share the result with us on the Google Forms that we have. And once we validate that, the AWS training and certification team will be sharing the free voucher to you, right? So that's the idea. We want to get the most from the AWS team across to other community, and that's the idea, right? With that, we will be stopping our live stream, and we can spend another 5 minutes or so to engage with each other, whoever is here. So again, thank you, Harith. Thank you for your time. For both the sessions, it has been insightful for us.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So yeah.